in a recent poll conducted by the Kiev International Institute of Sociology, 65 to 75% of Ukrainians said that Volodymyr Zelenskyy should remain president of the country until martial law has been lifted. The imposition of martial law bans presidential, general and local elections.
Now, this result flies in the face of accusations that Zelenskyy is exerting a monopoly on power. Well, to analyse the implications of this poll, we're joined by Andreas Umland, a political scientist at the Stockholm Centre for Eastern European Studies and a regular contributor to tvpworld. Welcome back, Mr. Umland.
Thanks for having me again.
OK, so that's a pretty high number, isn't it? Let's say 70% for the sake of convenience. 70% of Ukrainians don't mind giving up an election, which would have been held in March of this year. They have confidence that Zelenskyy is not going to take power over for himself using the war as an excuse. Would you agree?
Yes, and the number perhaps is not the number that Zelenskyy would receive in elections. That's the number of those people who are in favor of not having now presidential elections and thus keeping Zelenskyy. And he is still the most popular politician in Ukraine. And he would probably win an election that would be held now. But he has not as much popularity as he used to have. And he may not receive in the next elections, if he stands again, 73% again, as he did in 2019. So it's not that Ukrainians are sort of not interested in democracy. It's simply that they understand that conducting these elections is now not possible.
Now, when President Zelenskyy became the president of Ukraine, not many people believed in him, since he was a comedian, actor. Mm-hmm. So not many people saw him as a head of the state, a serious politician, I would say. Would you say that he passed this test of being a president? Because we're here seeing that many people support him, but still when you talk to Ukrainians, not that many people are actually supporting him when it comes to this war in Ukraine. There are mixed voices when it comes to his presidency. What is your take on that when you look at all the years that he has become a serious politician right now?
I wouldn't make a judgment, a sort of absolute judgment, just a comparative judgment. I don't think that the other possible candidates who were running in 2019, like Yulia Tymoshenko or Petro Poroshenko, would have been much different. They would have been perhaps not as good as Zelenskyy in public relations. This is, after all, Zelenskyy's profession. That is what he has been doing as a comedian and showman. And a famous book on him is called The Showman. And he has indeed been an excellent public communicator, both inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine. I think that is his main contribution in this whole story. Whether he was such a good leader in terms of diplomacy and the military and so on, that is a more, I would say, a question more open to discussion. There have indeed been, for instance, accusations against him that Ukraine's south was, for instance, in 2022 not sufficiently prepared for the Russian attack. That is one of the criticism that I have heard. In general, I think people in the West tend to overestimate Zelenskyy a little bit, and there is a lot of, I think, misguided discussion of what would happen to Ukraine if Zelenskyy disappears suddenly, and there is such a possibility because there have been already assassination attempts. I don't think actually much would happen to Ukraine. There would be simply another leader who may be worse than Zelenskyy in some regards, but may also be better than Zelenskyy in other regards. So I think Zelenskyy's role in general is slightly overrated.
Well, that's as may be, Mr. Umland, but there would be a psychological impact, would there not, if Zelenskyy were to suddenly disappear? from the political scene through assassination, for example. But moving on to a related topic, you're talking about his showmanship. It seems to be working, doesn't it? I mean, he had 100 countries and organizations attend the peace summit that he initiated. Still a lot of support and confidence in his leadership, do you think?
Well, the peace summit was sort of a mixed package, I would say. People had expected more, especially more attendance from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and also more signatures under the final communique. But still, I would say it was a success. It was a step in the right direction, although not as large a step as one would have hoped. I'm not sure that is so much related to the personality of Zelenskyy. I think what is more playing of a role here are the security considerations of, let's say, smaller countries that may see themselves in the role of Ukraine and may also fear neighboring countries that would behave in a way similar that Russia is now behaving if Russia comes out of this conflict with some sort of gain. And also there's empathy, I think, is a big factor here. And maybe that is not so much related personally to Zelenskyy. I think in the West, Zelenskyy was indeed very successful as a communicator. He also speaks decent English, maybe not as good as Poroshenko, for instance, but his English is decent. But for Asia, Africa, or Latin America, I don't see much of an impact of his personality.
Right. Well, you mentioned Asia. I mean, India was present, which was a notable country to be there. They've always kind of trod this fine line between Russia and the West. What do you read into their presence at this peace summit?
I think that's quite natural. India is a democracy. Perhaps not a perfect democracy, like most democracies are not perfect. And it has also its own conflict with China, which is a border conflict with China. And China is now, I would say, something like a partner and perhaps even ally of Russia, although it does not seem to yet deliver any major weaponry to Russia. So there is a situation now where basically every country has to choose where its preferences are. And I think the Ukrainian argument here is much stronger because it's an argument not actually so much about the liberal international order than about the traditional international order. It's not about democracy and freedom and values and so on. It's more about borders. Territorial integrity and political sovereignty. These are things that most countries can agree on. And also the topics of the peace summit, nuclear safety, the security of food supplies, or the return of the deported Ukrainian children. Mm-hmm. One would think that are also universal topics which should be also dear to countries that may not have much sympathy for liberal values.
I mean, when we look at the peace summit that took place in Switzerland, we can definitely see support for Ukraine, for Zelenskyy. But with all that said, can we talk about peace without Russia in the picture? Now, do you think we can look forward to the moment that Russia and Ukraine are going to meet up and they will finally talk about, the peace that we mean, meaning stopping the war and killing of people? What is your take on that?
Frankly, that's a quite difficult question because at least with the current leadership, of course, it wouldn't make much sense to have them at such a meeting because it would perhaps end in some sort of scandal, in some sort of confrontational situation. Such a situation may be in the interest of Ukraine. It may actually confront Russia with a demand for observation of elementary rules of international order, and then the other attendance of such a summit would have to speak out, whether they really think that borders, territorial integrity, and political sovereignty are not important anymore. So in that sense, it may actually make sense to confront Russia. In any way, I don't think it's now a very serious discussion. I don't see this really happening as long as Putin is at least in power. After Putin, perhaps such a meeting may make sense.
Understood. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Umland, for coming along and sharing your insights into this rather complex topic. Have a good evening, sir.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.